Hello, this is Jen Rubin, and this is Jen Rubin's Green Room. Wow, we sit on the precipice of Thanksgiving, a break I think we all need. And although there's much to be glum about, there's much to be thankful for as well. After all, the government did not shut down. After all, we have President Biden, who is cogent, skilled, resourceful, leading our country during a time of two raging complex wars. We have an economy that has really returned to vigor much faster than any other economy and much faster than many of the so-called experts imagined. And I think it is a time in which Democrats understand their own power. We saw earlier this month that Democrats over and over again reject the MAGA vision, reject the craziness, reject the extremism, reject the Dobbs view of subjugating women. And all of that is tremendously positive. And I stress over and over again to my listeners, to my readers, that ingesting too much media, on social media in particular, can be very deleterious, not only to your mental health, but to your understanding of what's going on. And there's a lot of nonsense out there. There's a lot of kind of displaced anxiety from people who are nervous about the election next year, which is understandable. But it shouldn't blind us to the real successes Democrats have had, the real strength that America has demonstrated, and its ability to sidestep disasters, in part because we have at least one party that is functional, that is responsible, and that is the Democratic Party. It's not that they're without fault. It's not that they get everything right, but they're trying. They try to be in the neighborhood, in the zip code of the truth. They try to stick to the facts. They try to work on actual problems rather than creating problems. They want a robust, complete view of history. They want children to all be respected. These are good things. These are responsible things. And the next thing, I guess, to having two good parties is having at least one good party. Goodness knows where we'd be if we had two parties that were completely out of whack. But we at least have one, and that's someplace to start. And I think it was interesting that just in recent days, we heard from Liz Cheney again. She was taking to task both the new speaker, Mike Johnson, for his really preposterous views and indifference to the country's fiscal future, and also really taking it to Senator Mike Lee, who was fanning yet another bizarro January 6th conspiracy theory. And she said to Mike Lee, "I know you. You're a lawyer. You know better than this." And it was so delicious because it was a man behind the curtain moment. She understands what a little man he is, and that he deep down someplace understands this is all a bunch of hooey, and she's going to call him out on it. And I think that's so refreshing because unfortunately the media doesn't always call out these people the way they should. They simply say, Mike Lee said X, Y, and Z. Others say A, B, and C, as opposed to saying Mike Lee, who is a lawyer by trade, came out with a bizarre conspiracy theory, which suggests that he either doesn't care or doesn't want to break with the neo-fascist movement that his party now represents. So you wish the press would say that. You wish more people would be candid, but I'll take Liz Cheney. She's not a bad one to be forthcoming with and about her former colleagues. And of course, one of the people who served with Liz Cheney knows her well and takes a similar approach, I think, to Republicans in debunking them, in calling them out for lies. He has to sit there through hearings. He has to listen to them pontificate. Is the congressman from California, Eric Swalwell. And I got a chance to talk to Eric. It was last week. just before the Democrats were once again going to go in, vote to save the day and keep the government open. And it turned out to be a really interesting, very timely conversation. Welcome to the show, Congressman.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
It's my pleasure. It is absolutely my pleasure. It seems like there's no bottom for Donald Trump and the MAGA group. It is now, they're not trying to hide it. Trump is literally using Hitlerian phrases. Is there any sense among your Republican colleagues that he's gone too far, or that they're embarrassed by this, or they think that this is a problem for America?
No, in fact, the ones I talk to are privately wish casting that he would just go away, but they're just paralyzed with fear for their own safety, fear for their own electability, and then just fear reputationally for what it would mean to them if they were to stand up against him. And so that's why we can't count on them. And I think we just have to stay on the same path that we've been on, which is, to organize and mobilize, at the ballot box, to keep beating him. And I know that's frustrating if you feel like you did that in 18 and you did that in 20 and you did that in 22 and you did that in Virginia and Kentucky and Ohio in 23. But it is going to be effective. And I think we have the best shot next November to truly bury MAGAism once and for all.
And it's my sense, I've told readers, listeners, that really the only way to get the Republican Party to change is to have them lose. Because I assume that most of your Republican colleagues don't really buy into this stuff. They're doing it, as you say, because they're so desperate to hold on to their seats.
Desperate to hold on to their seats. And as I said, they look at Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger and they think, well, I don't want to live that life. I don't want to have all of these death threats from Trump's supporters come at me. I don't want, Trump, and he'll toe the line with his own threats that he makes. And so your life is upended. Both of them are clearly no longer in office. And I do think part of this is I serve with too many people who think this is the only job they can get. And so if that's the mindset, then you're really guarded about, taking any risk that would mean you'd have to get another job. And it's kind of crazy because when I got elected to Congress, I was hoping I was, giving up other, more financially lucrative opportunities, to do a job, for the greater good. So I don't really want to serve with people who can't get other jobs. But it looks like that's, a good chunk of my colleagues.
I am so glad you say this, because when readers ask me, well, they could go out and get better jobs. No, who's going to hire, MTG? Who's going to hire these lunatics? They have the best job, the most attention they are ever going to get in their lives. So, of course, they're not going to give that up, willingly.
The best way for me to describe it is that I work in pro wrestling. And so hear me out here.
Yep.
And I'll give you just the best example. During the second impeachment of Donald Trump, after I presented on the Senate floor for the trial, I was on a bathroom break. We were using the senator's bathroom and was washing my hands. And right next to me was Senator Ted Cruz, also washing his hands. Looked over at me, and I'd never met him in person before, and put his fist out and said, "Hey, I'm Ted." And I looked at him like he had three heads, because the night before he was name checking me on Fox News, and he had been tweeting at me a number of times in the weeks before. And he could tell I was confused. And then he said to me, you guys are doing a hell of a job out there. And I couldn't believe what he was saying. And then I realized, well, we're in the bathroom. Nobody else is around. We're not in the ring. The lights and the cameras and the audience are not here. So he can just be himself. But when we're in the ring, he has to hit me over the head with a steel chair, because the fans, who I call constituents, want that. And the danger of that, if you say, well, that's great that at least he doesn't believe it. Well, no, the danger of it is if the fans think that he believes it, then that's what leads them to take out violent acts as they did on January 6th. And so it also, just as a legislator, makes it really hard for me to negotiate or work with anybody when you don't even know what the hell their core set of principles are. If it's just, as you said, it's all about fame, fandom, and fantasy.
Exactly. The other, I guess, wrestling match that you're in constantly are these hearings, the so-called investigations. Do the Republicans realize they've sort of made fools of themselves, that they haven't gone anywhere? If they are, why do they keep having them? They seem, they go from bad to worse for the Republicans as you guys kind of extract not only information that is exonerating, if you will, to the targets, but that are harmful to the Republicans.
Jen, I don't think you're giving them enough credit. I think by the end of the year, Comer and Jordan are going to be able to prove that Hunter Biden is Joe Biden's son. I think that's coming, right. And we need to be ready for that they're probably going to be able to prove that.
Exactly.
Look, they don't have an Adam Schiff or a Jamie Raskin on their side. They don't have serious people leading these investigations. And it's not surprising at all that, Comer one week would make a big deal that Joe Biden, when he was not president, loaned his brother money and then was repaid the money. And that Comer has done the exact same thing, almost to the same amount, with his own family member. So again, these investigations are not serious. I don't believe they will actually impeach Joe Biden. I actually think this is all to just kind of, put a cloud over him to
right.
try and both sides, Trump and Biden as we go into the election. And I think they're afraid of bringing those articles of impeachment forward for two reasons. One, that they would not have the votes, or worse, if they did have the votes, and it went to the Senate, that you could have probably the largest bipartisan acquittal that you've ever seen. And so I do think what you'll end up getting is just like a protracted investigation, as you said, that is debunked each week.
Right.
New pieces of evidence.
And what about their other stunt, which is to impeach the head of Homeland Security, Secretary Mayorkas? That got sent back to committee, or is that going to see the light of day, or is that another one of these kind of exercises where it just kind of goes on forever?
Well, it had a lot of momentum until the border crossings went way down and the fentanyl seizures, have gone way up, meaning that like CBP is,
doing their job
to get and do their job. I'm a little concerned though that, so many Republicans without any formal, impeachment inquiry process were willing to just ad hoc, throw out for the first time, in over 100 years, a cabinet official just because they didn't want to be unpopular with the MTG crowd.
Right.
But again, it just shows to me a lack of seriousness in what we have to get done. And every single day, Democrats have shown, we're interested in governing and Republicans are interested in ruling.
There is, I think it's fair to say, the lowest possible expectation of what these Republicans can do. They can barely keep the government open, and that's only because Democrats keep voting to bail them out. Right. Is there any topic that you can think of where there actually might be a bipartisan constructive deal? Is there something that we can hope that would motivate them that is not off in crazy land?
What unites a lot of us is taking on China and recognizing, just the economic threat that they pose. However, I am now starting to have pause, though, that if China did invade Taiwan, that Republicans would defend Taiwan. It just seems to me that if you're soft on Russia, it doesn't make sense to me that you would be tough on China. And so I thought China was always the one that we were united on. And now I just wonder if they would walk, away from that. But no, there's not much right now. And as I said, they're led by, the lowest common denominator, which is this, chaotic, group of Freedom Caucus members who conceived this idea, by the way, of what they call a laddered continuing resolution, to keep the government open, conceived it, and then killed it when the speaker went ahead with it. They are now the ones who have killed it. And we have witnessed something 3 times, if this goes the way I think it's going to go in about a short time from now on the government funding bill. 3 times we've seen something that has not happened in modern history, which is that the minority party will deliver the majority of the votes on a consequential piece of legislation. You had it on paying our bills to extend the debt ceiling. You had it to avert a government shutdown back at the end of September, and you're going to have it again to do it and avert a shutdown, that we're headed into right now.
This is the reverse of the so-called Hastert rule, where you weren't going to put anything on the floor. Now the rule, I suppose, should be they can't put anything on the floor that most Democrats won't vote for because their own people certainly won't do it. So it's certainly a perverse kind of turnaround.
My other prediction, though, is that they will not throw Johnson out for doing this, which, if that is the case, what does that say about Kevin McCarthy, that Johnson will have just weeks later have done the same thing that McCarthy did, rely on Democratic votes, yet Johnson won't be thrown overboard. I think that shows that in this business, it's very much about trust and relationships, and McCarthy didn't have much of either.
It really is kind of shocking in a way. I cannot imagine a Democratic caucus, whether it was with Speaker Pelosi or Speaker Jeffries, that kind of backbiting, that kind of personal vendetta. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised because that's how these people operate, like they're in junior high school with feuds and cliques. But it is pretty remarkable that you could get the job you always wanted in your entire life, and 9 months later, none of the people really want to keep you around. It's somewhat shocking. Let's talk a little bit about, you brought it up, about foreign policy, Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan. There certainly is a segment of the MAGA group that is isolationist, that is frankly pro-authoritarian, pro-Putin. Is that the majority of them, or do you think there's still a majority in the House that, if they could vote on it, would approve aid to Israel, aid to Ukraine, aid to Taiwan?
Well, it's reaching a tipping point. And what you're seeing, I think, is kind of this mob mentality where it starts with a small group of them, but through outside groups and through, the validation of Donald Trump supporting them, you see other Republican colleagues who wouldn't otherwise support that become fearful that, they could lose in a primary or they'd have Trump's wrath. And so they jump on board. You saw this, by the way, right after the 2020 election, when, Speaker Johnson, was the architect of a letter and a brief to try and overturn the election. And it had not much momentum and steam. And then all of a sudden it hit this tipping point, and it had a majority of the Republican members. And the same thing on January 6th, where you had a majority of the members, voting, to overturn the election. So I'm fearful we're starting to see that again on Ukraine. One lesson, though, that I think we can learn on Israel, its prime minister, came in, seeking, retaliation against his enemies, seeking to consolidate power, seeking to limit freedom and reduce, democratic principles. And by doing that, it certainly looks like, he took his eye off the ball, and an enemy, very ruthlessly and brutally, a terrorist group, capitalized on that. And so when I think forward to what could happen in our country, if Donald Trump was brought back into power, and knowing how vindictive he is, and knowing how, just power hungry he is, if he were to make the same type of effort to consolidate power, punish his enemies, what enemy of America would see that as an opportunity, to capitalize on us being distracted? And so I hope that lesson is taken away from, the awful attack that Israel suffered.
Absolutely. And I often wonder if Putin and the Russians, if nothing else, think, hey, we just have to make it like another year and then our guy will be back and everything will be back to normal and we'll get a free pass here.
Donald Trump essentially bought Ukraine one more year at least of having to defend itself when he said at a town hall that he would end the conflict within 24 hours. Because when Vladimir Putin heard that, what he recognized was two things. One, he has, the manpower to just grind it out in eastern Ukraine and buy time for Donald Trump to be elected. And two, he has the playbook that he ran in 2016 of how to get Donald Trump support in our election. And so he certainly, I think Donald Trump guaranteed that this conflict will go at least into winter 2024.
Absolutely. One of the issues that you've been particularly active on is guns. And here is a perfect example of the complete disconnect between public opinion, public desire, and their representatives. Part of that is the gerrymandering. Part of that is the money in politics. There was a small bill. I don't want to denigrate it because I think anything that the NRA doesn't like is positive. It was a small measure. If Democrats are able to retake the House and there is still a Senate, let's say, majority or a tie, but certainly not beyond a filibuster, is there any hope to go forward on a gun measure? Are there other areas in which you think at least Senate Republicans can cooperate with a House majority to pass?
Yes, I'm not losing hope. And it's also because, I see, the Parkland generation really coming of age now and realizing the agency that they have in all of this. For example, one of the survivors, David Hogg, has now graduated college and has founded an organization to get people elected at the statewide level who are under the age of 25. And they just had their first victory in the recent Virginia elections. And so they're not going, to give up on this. And they recognize, it was a big victory. The Safer Communities Act that was passed last year, first time in 30 years that we made progress, especially around red flag laws on gun safety. And so I think it's going to continue to grow as a top issue that people care about. And look, when you see a colleague of mine, and so much credit to him, like Jared Golden, who had said he had opposed an assault weapons ban, and then when it came to his community, recognized that we needed to do more. I think that just shows that, we have to, keep persuading people. And so I'm not giving up on it. I'm a father of a 6-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old, and the two oldest are already doing mass shooter drills in their classroom. And my goal is that by the time they're in high school, they're in a much different and safer environment. So I'm still very, very optimistic about this.
And it's interesting you should mention David Hogan, young people. Although I think we're going through a very bad stretch, my sense is that the millennials and Generation Z have their act together to a degree to which the boomers and, other older generations didn't. That they seem to be uniquely engaged. They're technologically savvy. They're certainly concerned about the planet. What do you see when you talk to younger voters, when you talk to college kids? Have they tuned out, or are they tuning back in and recognizing, hey, this is the whole shebang here?
They want to believe that their participation means something and makes a difference. And that, I believe, is the greatest challenge for us, because their participation in 20 and 22, or 18, 20, and 22 at record levels is why we won the House, won the White House, kept the House, won the Senate, kept the Senate, and will or will not win the White House in 24. I think the mistake that we've made in the past with young people has been to tell them to register to vote and then to go vote. And we didn't do anything in between. And we're recognizing that it has to be a journey to the ballot box. It can't just be, telling them that this is their duty. And that journey is, civic engagement of, town squares, town halls, and that's your true agency, is that because you participated, you can have expectations of the people who you voted for. One issue that I have been working on and still believe could really make a difference would be to have mobile voting. And what I would like to see is to prove to me that we can't do it, because we have seen in pilot cases in West Virginia and Utah, especially for service members overseas, that they are able to vote on their mobile devices. That you can use, encrypted technologies that allow, an audit trail. You can geo tag or geo fence the device so that it has to be within a ballot box or a polling place. There's a lot you can do on the security side, and I think if we could find a way securely, and to be able to audit it, that would dramatically increase participation. And so I'm not giving up on that. I recognize you want it to be bulletproof, but I don't think that means we shouldn't try.
Right. All right. California is going to have some interesting politics next year. You have an open Senate seat. Kevin McCarthy may or may not be there. And you have some House seats, not exactly close by to you, but kind of your neck of the woods, the kind of Central Valley and that part of California. Can Democrats pick up some seats there?
Yeah, certainly in the Palm Springs area, former federal prosecutor Will Rollins is running again and running again on kind of a freedom agenda. He's running against someone who has voted against, the freedom, to love who you want to love. And Will is a gay American, understands his community, expects that freedom to be protected. He also prosecuted January 6 cases and is running against a party that is frankly been anti-democracy. So that's one race that I'm watching with interest. And then, frankly, in the Senate race, I'm on Team Schiff. I think whoever wins, will be terrific. But it is going to be, a new chapter in California politics with, Nancy Pelosi no longer as Speaker, Senator Feinstein, no longer in the Senate. But I think it's an opportunity as well for, a new generation, to step up and lead.
Well, that's a good place to leave it then. Thanks so much. Thanks for what you do. Thanks for putting up with your colleagues. I don't know how you keep your sanity. You must go home and scream into a pillow every night.
Jen, the easiest thing I do every day, or the hardest thing I do every day, is to put a 6-year-old, 5-year-old, and a 2-year-old in a car and off to school and daycare. After that, everything's easy.
There you go. Well, I think dealing with toddlers is the perfect kind of training for your line of work. Okay. So thank you so much, Congressman. We'll have you back soon. Bye-bye.
My pleasure. Thank you.
And that was Congressman Swalwell. Well, as we suspect, most of the people on the other side of the aisle from him are not people who are there so much because they're interested in the greater good. What they are interested in is keeping their jobs. And that's why they show no inclination towards independence, towards doing the right thing, towards serving their constituents. It's silly to make those sorts of appeals to people. How can you make an argument to someone who doesn't care whether he is serving the needs of his constituents? All he cares about is keeping his head down low enough so that he can get reelected. And if he has to say ridiculous things, if he has to take votes that are meaningless or that actively work against the interests of his constituency? No problem. Because after all, the most important thing is staying there and staying in office and getting reelected and elected again. And these people have nowhere else to go. Congressman Swalwell is absolutely right. The quality of lawmakers has gotten so low on the Republican side that these are not people who could get prime jobs. It used to be, oh, well, you lose your seat, you go work on K Street, or you get a great job with a law firm. What law firm is going to hire Lauren Boebert? What law firm is going to want someone like Jim Jordan? It's preposterous. So instead, they hang on because this is the only job they have. This is the only way they stay to be important people and get to hobnob with rich people and get people to pay attention to them. Otherwise, they'd go back to being nobodies. Now, I will say it must take a toll on people. And in fact, we've had, I think it's the third Texas, Dallas area congressperson who has said, I'm leaving, I'm out of here. And in fact, the most recent one has decided to go back and run for state senate. Think about that for a moment. Serving in Congress is so awful. You would rather go back home, serve in the state senate, which is essentially a part-time job, meets irregularly, than remain and have to put up with the crazies. But who can blame them? Who really would want to trade places with them? So I think it's a challenge for Democrats to keep the really good people there, because as soon as they have an opportunity to get out, a lot of them do. And in fact, you're seeing most recently a slew of people who, frankly, are so good that their talent is wasted in the House. You have people like Abigail Spanberger from Virginia, 7th District. She's not going to run for re-election. She's going to run for governor of Virginia. I think she'll make a great candidate. But will the Democrats keep that seat? Will that be a blow to the House? Yeah, it could be. Similarly, Elisa Slotkin in Michigan is going to run for the Michigan Senate. So she's going to escape from the House as well. Now, understand, it's a better job to be in the Senate and have to listen to Ted Cruz all day long than it is to be in the House. That's how bad things are. But she's moving up and moving on as well. So I do worry that as the good people matriculate up and get higher office or do find other jobs, because Democrats actually are employable elsewhere, that you won't have the Eric Swalwells, you won't have the Adam Schiffs, another congressman who is looking for higher office, that you won't have people who are sharp enough to run rings around the Republicans. And that would be a loss to the country, because when you come right down to it, the only thing between complete chaos, complete dysfunction, government shutdown, debt problems is the Democratic Party. That's the only thing that's keeping us from the wolves' door. And it's the only thing that's keeping America as the preeminent power in the world. So they've got to shore up their base. They've got to put on their tough game face. They got to ignore some of these polls and some of the whining and grousing about President Biden, because the country depends upon them. They better get reelected. And if they're leaving, they better find successors who are going to be able to operate successfully in that horror show of the House of Representatives. So that is our show for today. If you enjoyed it, please tell your friends. They can listen and follow us on Apple Podcasts, on Spotify, or wherever they get their podcasts. Bye-bye.